Hey, everybody. Welcome to Common Censored. I'm Lee Camp. I'm joined by Eleanor Goldfield.
Hello.
That was Pyre from the new EP by, let me see here, checking notes, Eleanor Goldfield. Hope you like it. If so, check out No Solo is the EP, and it is at artkillingapathy.com. This is the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other stuff. I missed you guys.
Didn't we miss them? We did it. We did a half episode last week. So
Not last week, the week before.
week before last. Sometime in the past.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure I was there. Half sure I was there.
Right. Yeah. I think so. But it's really good to be back with y'all, and we have some good and terrible stories for you.
You know, the huge. Good and terrible.
Yeah. So I kind of want to. Did you want to say anything else, or should I just dive in?
Well, we can just dive in, but let's start with the good news. Happy Pride Month. There's that, right?
There is that, and I'd like to take a moment to say to all of my fellow queer folks and LGBTQ folks and two spirits, let's celebrate and let's also remember at the same time that Pride is a riot. And I have a piece coming out about this in the Queer Art Collective that'll be out later this month, I believe. But I want to look. It's always important to celebrate love and to be loud about it and unapologetic. And I think at the same time, again, it's super important to remember the roots of LGBTQ and recognize a few things. First off, that let me start that sentence over. I'm sorry.
We'll give you a redo. You get one redo per episode.
My brain was already at the end of the sentence, and I realized that my mouth was at the front and that it was not going to make any sense.
Was the end of the sentence platypus?
No.
Oh.
But
I wanted to do a reverse Mad Lib.
But here's the question. Is it queer platypi or queer platypuses? And if it's queer platypuses, that sounds a little dirty.
So these are LGBTQ platypuses or pussies, which would be even more interesting.
But I digress. Because Lee
was that
knocked me off the tracks.
This is my fault. You did it.
So it's important to recognize a couple of things. First off, Black and people of color in the LGBTQ community were really at the forefront of pushing the concept of Pride and the concept of LGBTQ rights. And it is super important to recognize those intersections of culture and race and queerness. It's also super important to recognize that the corporatization of Pride is the bastardization of Pride. It is basically the taking down of everything that Pride should stand for. The corporatization means basically the antithesis of liberation, the antithesis of human rights, which are at the core of Pride. Yes, Pride is a celebration of love, which is therefore inherently anti-capitalist. And it is also the recognition of the solidarity of fighting for human rights among, of course, LGBTQ, but also across those intersections that I mentioned, and recognizing the entirety of people, all of their identities, all of who somebody is, and recognizing that all of our pieces, all of the parts that make us a whole person demand and deserve basic human rights. And this is at the core of Pride, and you lose sight of that necessarily when that shit is corporatized. So for instance, recently it came out that, I mean, this is not coming out as anything new. You all see that corporations are constantly putting up pride flags, and then last summer it was, right, Black Lives Matter flags and shit, because they want to They want to be where the consumption is. They want to make sure that they're inviting in consumers by doing whatever's hip and chic and whatever's
I gotta tell
trendy.
you, the rainbow-colored Bank of America logo when the sun hits it at just the right angle is just fucking beautiful. I mean, it just brings a tear to your eye that Bank of America would care so much about, LGBTQ issues. I'm gonna let you speak because I can't. I'm choking up too much.
That's fine. I'll go ahead and speak. So we've all seen this, right? And I think there's this knee-jerk reaction to be like, oh, cool. Because we're programmed to think inside the confines of a capitalist structure.
And there were so many years where that was not the case, that it's easy to be like, oh, thank God these corporations that, are so massive are a pivotal part of America, unfortunately. Thank God they're finally doing this. So there's so many years where it was just like, don't talk about it, keep it quiet, nobody admit you're gay, like that.
Right.
It seems like advancement.
Right, absolutely. And that, of course, speaks to which is something that I've talked about before, I believe, on this show as well, the malleability of capitalism, right? I think it's very dangerous to think of capitalism as a structure that has no ability to shift.
Right.
The foundations will always remain the same, but it has the ability to kind of like twist and turn with the cultural shifts on top of the foundations of oppression and extraction.
I know you won't get this reference, but it's like the one of the X-Men. I think it was a bad guy the X-Men were fighting, but then maybe they joined forces with her. But anyway, she could. I think
You're
it was
right.
played,
I don't
think it
get
was
this.
played by Rebecca Romaine Stamos, but initially, and then it's. But anyway,
Wow, there's a name
she
I haven't
could.
heard in a minute.
She could be different people, and she would become whatever she needed to basically trick others and to have various powers and stuff. And that's what capitalism does in order to fight its enemies. It shifts and changes, shape shifts to become whatever it needs to succeed.
Great. I thank you for that reference. I'm sure some listeners will appreciate it. I learned something today. Of course, now I'm just thinking about Rebecca Romaine Stamos, but that's not the point.
Mystique is the character's name.
I see. Thank you.
I think it was later played by Jennifer Lawrence. Wasn't it?
Anywho, so the basically when these companies put up the pride flag, you got to look behind it. Just like when the companies just put up the Black Lives Matter banner, you have to look behind it at what that corporation is doing.
It says made in China on the back, doesn't it?
Well, that too. But 9 times out of 10, that company is engaged in, at the very least, anti-human rights legislation pushes and what's it called? When you lobbying, but
or working with companies that are horrific in terms of human rights abuses.
Exactly.
So it'll be like Walmart will say it, and then Walmart is also in bed with the manufacturers of prison labor clothing, like shit
Right.
like that.
And again, this speaks to the solidarity of intersections and recognizing that, let's say that, for instance, Lockheed Martin, the weapons manufacturer, has an LGBTQ quote unquote employee resource group. I'm not fucking kidding you, called Pride. So, and of course, besides the fact that Lockheed Martin makes its money off of predominantly bombing children, it's also in league with, countries like Saudi Arabia, where you can literally be beheaded for being gay.
Right.
So, and even let's say even if it weren't in league with countries like Saudi Arabia, the understanding that to be against human rights is therefore against the concepts of LGBTQ stances and solidarity is
Right.
really important. But there are, even just on the very shallow level of being anti-LGBTQ, recently the Business Insider, which is not a place I would recommend.
It's not like leftist, but they will have articles that are a little outside kind of your normal like CNN articles sometimes, and I think it's just because they're looking for clicks, and so sometimes they'll go rogue.
So this is one of
another
those...
X-Men name. It's the X-Men episode, folks.
And I have no idea. So this is another one of those moments. Dozens of companies, including Walmart, McDonald's, and Amazon, are celebrating Pride after donating hundreds of thousands of dollars to politicians who voted against the Equality Act. Now, the Equality Act is a bill that amends existing civil rights law to explicitly include sexual orientation and gender identification as protected characteristics. The protections extend to employment, housing, loan applications, education, public accommodations, and other areas. So you are literally flying the pride flag while donating. These three companies alone collectively donated $1 million plus to lawmakers who voted against the Equality Act. So, and the argument here from the companies is that, well, look, we donate to a lot of lawmakers, Democrats, Republicans, people we don't necessarily agree with, which in my mind, I'm like, well, then why the fuck are you donating money if you disagree with them? Of course, it's because, again, the foundations of capitalism. Right. These lawmakers will ensure that these companies have no taxes, that these companies can union bust.
Won't be regulated. Yeah.
Right. So basically all of the things that these companies want to protect their bottom line will be ensured by these lawmakers. And hey, look, if they bomb children or, are bigots and hate gay people on the side, that's none of our business. We're just trying to run a business here.
And something that's even talked about less is it also causes the reverse, where if a company is coming along, let's say it's a competitor to McDonald's or something, and it refuses to donate to let's say half of all politicians in Congress because they, are doing horrific things or didn't vote on this amendment or, are against LGBT rights or whatever the reason. Let's say they take a moral stance and do not donate to those politicians. Then there will be a large swath of Congress that is perfectly fine with regulating or, breaking up or whatever this company that was trying to compete with McDonald's. So now they're at a great disadvantage against, let's say, a McDonald's in that they don't own half of Congress. And so this capitalism ensures that those who are willing to take the least moral stance will be the ones that own the government.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. and the Amazon spokesperson who spoke to Business Insider basically said as much. An Amazon spokesperson told Insider that the company, quote, engages with policymakers and regulators on a wide range of issues that affect our business, customers, and employees. This does not mean we agree with any individual or political organization 100% of the time on every issue. And this includes legislation that discriminates or encourages discrimination against the LGBTQ community, end quote. You're basically just saying that, like, look, we give money, we bribe politicians to ensure that we never have to raise our minimum wage or ensure that our drivers aren't pissing into bottles. And if that means that, some gay people get beaten and that's not marked a hate crime, look, we're trying to run a business here, okay? That's what we're trying to do. So I'm sorry, but here, have a rainbow flag, and you can cover your wounds with that.
They're also like, hey, we believe in equality. We make all of our employees piss in bottles. We don't care about your gender or your race or your sexual, what qualifiers? What's the word?
Orientation.
Sexual orientation. Because I was about to use the old term from the early 2000s, which was preference, but that is not the term anymore. Yeah, we don't care about any of that. We just want to oppress you, not for like anything that you are, except working for us. We just oppress all of you.
Right. And this also comes at a time when there's a record number of anti-trans bills that are popping up all over the US. And we can't decouple this from these donations. And basically that when you're handing somebody money as they're signing on to a bill that basically says, you have to use the bathroom that coordinates with your fucking birth certificate, then you are basically saying we agree with you. That is an agreement. And you can't wriggle your way out of that. Of course, these companies try to, and a lot of people don't look past the pride flag that they post on their websites or on their stores or what have you. But the reality is that these companies are not in agreement with these lawmakers, they are supporting them. They are supporting the lawmakers who are writing these bills. They are supporting these lawmakers who are basically, pedestaling hate crimes against the LGBTQ community. So, yeah, the corporatization of pride on any level is fucking grotesque and the antithesis of pride. But there are moments such as these where it is in particularly overt and grotesque. So watch out for that. Don't be fooled by the rainbow flag. I know it's very pretty, and I know that we want it to mean, ubiquitously mean that whoever flies that flag is on our side and believes in our right to basic human rights. But that is not the fucking case. Just like anybody can fly a fucking Black Lives Matter flag, it doesn't mean a goddamn thing.
A lot of people who fly a rainbow flag voted for Biden. So
exactly.
Some of them voted for Trump as well, so it's all pretty ugly.
Yeah.
It doesn't. You got to learn what the person stands for beyond just the flag. But this is similar to an article I just read today about how big tech claims to stand up or support Black lives, and yet in their actual behavior they don't really at all. They are continuing to allow racist shit to grow. But also the thing the article doesn't address, which I think it desperately needed to, is that they also suppress those of us who are actually demanding equality or demanding that this various forms of hatred end in this country, and abuse and discrimination. And those of us who actually stand up for those things are heavily suppressed.
Absolutely. So,
quick note before we get to the next topic. Do you want to see this show keep going? I hope your answer is yes. If your answer is no, then I disagree. I disagree. If you want to see the show keep going, though, please go over to liberapay.com/LeeCamp, liberapay.com/LeeCamp. We have no advertisers. We have no sponsors. We are not funded by anyone, so it's really just you. It's you guys. If you got $1 out of the last episode, or you feel like you're getting $1, you're getting close to $1 out of this episode, then go to liberapay.com/LeeCamp, and you can sign up there. And all the other donations, like the stuff on the super chats on YouTube and on Venmo and things like that, all of those are redonated to people who are struggling. So this one, liberapay.com/LeeCamp, is the only place that actually helps fund this show. Also, Eleanor's new EP, I mentioned it earlier, is out. It's at artkillingapathy.com. Check it out, artkillingapathy.com. You can get it there. If you want to give it a listen, you can give it a listen on Spotify, but please go and purchase it over at Art Killing Apathy in order to support artists rather than just steal content. Eleanor's movie is at hardroadofhope.com. And you can email us at commoncensored@protonmail.com if you have something you want, a topic you want us to cover, or if you want to request some of the solidarity funds, which we've been working on for people. That is commoncensored@protonmail.com. All right, let's keep it going.
Okay, so this happened this past weekend. Some of y'all might already be aware, but so in Minneapolis, once again, there were protests that started after the June 3rd murder of Winston Smith by police. and protests have been ongoing. And this past weekend on Sunday, a woman who used her car to block traffic and protect protesters was intentionally and at high speed rammed by a terrorist as he plowed his car into the crowd. Deona Marie, I'm not sure how to say her last name. Knajdek,
maybe.
Was taken to a hospital after a good while, I'll say. Ambulances were slow to arrive, and the police were harassing and haranguing protesters instead of aiding them after this assault. Several other people were injured. Deona was the one person who was killed. She was taken to a hospital eventually and died that night. She was a single mother of 2 daughters, aged 11 and 13. Her birthday is today, as we record this, June 16th, and there are continued protests and birthday march for her at 6 p.m. tonight in Minneapolis, if you're in the area, at Lake Street and Girard. And you can find out more. I've been looking at Minnesota Teen Activists, their Instagram page at MN Teen Activists. So you can check that out if you'd like to get updates on what's going on there. Vishal Singh, who is a journalist, also reported on this in the past couple of days on their Instagram account, writing, quote, "Activists are the ones who detained the driver. Ambulances arrived after riot police came and threatened the survivors of the terrorist attack. Activist medics tended to the injured, even under threat of being hit with, quote, less than lethal weapons by police."
And we're hearing a little bit about this one, but this has been happening more and more. These terrorists, drivers driving through protesters, and it gets about 1,000 times less coverage than the one that you and I were at in Charlottesville. And I think the main reason for that is simply that could be used by the mainstream media to go after Trump. And nowadays, this isn't useful to their. I'm not saying they covered it wrong when they covered Charlottesville. I'm just saying that, like, there's a reason this gets one little CNN report and the Charlottesville one got roughly 9 kajillion. That is a number I just made up, and it went over weeks and weeks talking about what happened in Charlottesville. And it was because the mainstream media's goal was just to go after Trump, which they were going after him rightfully in that matter. You know, him saying, "Oh, good people on both sides," all that garbage. Totally a horrible human being, and they should have gone after him. But this should get equal coverage now, and instead it gets a mention.
Well, and I think the other thing, which is absolutely horrifying, is that this is becoming normalized. It is not only normalized in a sort of socio-political sense, but in a legislative sense.
And in a sociopath sense.
Yeah. Florida, of course, passed legislation that said that it is legal for people to hit protesters with their car. I saw a great meme, however, that had a little suggestion for folks. You know, Florida has the stand your ground law, which means that if someone's coming at you with the car, then you have the right to shoot them because you feel threatened. So you have the right to stand your ground. Just throwing that out there.
Apparently. And you would think that when the Florida case, you would think that, oh, maybe the GOP lawmakers that were the ones forcing it through, they would kind of hide behind, like, oh, put it as an amendment to something, some bill,
Nope.
and quietly sneak it in there. No. The governor DeSantis gave a speech about the bill or whatever as he was signing it and said, "Could you imagine hardworking Floridians on their way home from a long day of work and they're blocked by people standing in the street when they're trying to get home? It's just ridiculous." Like, he basically gave a speech on how it just makes sense to be able to drive through these people.
Right, which basically is, you know, the mindset that if you're inconvenienced, you have the right to kill someone. Literally, that's what that means.
If you're white and inconvenienced.
Right. And so, and again, like with the normalization, folks might not be aware, for instance, that last year at an LA protest for Breonna Taylor, and this is just one other example, there have been several other examples of cars driving into protesters. But for instance, in LA last year, there was somebody who drove into the crowd, Vishal Singh, who I've already quoted here, had their foot run over. Another protester's skull was fractured. The LAPD let the driver go and was even seen to be making jokes about the people who were injured. This is not just the normalization of this kind of violence, but it is the normalization of the outright fascist status quo of police in this country, that they have the right, they have, carte blanche to kill, maim, threaten, black bag like we saw in Portland last year, protesters on a whim, whenever the fuck they want, and there won't be any accountability. This driver in LA was fucking let go after they fucking ran into a crowd of people and fractured someone's skull. So...
And with Charlottesville, we saw, even though the driver ultimately was arrested and convicted, the cops were apparently told to basically stand down that day, allowing white supremacists to beat and attack people. And when the terrorist attack happened, the cops were, despite the fact that we knew they were just a few blocks away, they were all there in their fucking military garb and everything. They took forever to show up. I mean, it was probably 20 or 30 minutes. The first people to help were the street medics, which were helping immediately. Then the fire and EMT showed up maybe 10 minutes later. And then another 10 minutes after that, cops showed up and, promptly started to harass and arrest protesters. But...
Well, right. And the same thing happened in Minneapolis this past weekend. Instead of assisting people who had literally just been the victims of a terrorist attack, the riot police threatened to use less than lethal force after lethal force had just been used on activist medics trying to assist people who had been injured. That is the reality of the fucking situation. And it needs to be repeated. It needs to be highlighted, and we need to make it very clear.
You mean repeated as in spoken about, not done again?
Yeah, right. The situation needs to be talked about. Yes. In repetitive means, and it needs to be very clear where we stand, and it needs to be very clear what we are. Like the socio-political situation that we are in. And I'm not trying to say this to scare people away from going to protests, because I think that it's very important that we not, be pushed back and silenced. I think it's very important that we remain vigilant and keep going out into the streets. These are our streets, our cities, our home places. And so I think it's very important that we continue to do that, but recognizing that we have to stay vigilant and be safe, doing things in a safe way. Kind of like a friend of mine who's a war veteran said that protesters need to learn how to walk down the street. And I didn't really get what that meant, because I was like, well, just walking down a street. And he was like, no, you walk down a street as a unit. You are always very aware of where your exits are, where somebody could be coming from. And it's creepy as shit, I admit, to think about it like you're in a war zone, but you are. Like, you really fucking are. And it's so, like, the cops are aware of these things, and the cops know exactly where you are. They know exactly how to kettle you, how to surveil you, how to whatever the fuck. And again, I'm not trying to fucking scare you. I'm trying to prepare. And I think it's important that we recognize that this is something that we have to prep for when we go out. This is not like a happy, fucking happy valley, kumbaya, like protest, environment.
Well, and you're getting to a good point, which is, despite this uptick in people driving into protesters, so we've seen a few. It's really, it's not that many compared to many things that could happen or do happen to people every day. But it doesn't even, it's not a drop in the bucket compared to how most protesters end up getting injured, which is by police. Police, you know, they are the ones you're usually keeping an eye out for. They are the ones that are generally speaking more likely to crack someone's skull or hit you with tear gas or hit you with rubber bullets. We have a friend and a fellow reporter who had her, hip fractured by police during the BLM protests here in D.C. Police are generally the perpetrators of the mass amount, the far greater majority of injuries and attacks on protesters than the tiny number of people that have been hit by these cars. But these cars are obviously, the terrorist car attack is obviously, visually maybe it's more horrific to people, but really you have to be safe from all of these things when you go to a protest. And again, like you said, we're not telling people to back down. We're saying the opposite. We're saying the more people you could get to go out, the more people that are united together in this, the less risk there is of these attacks from police.
And again, being safe. It doesn't cost you anything. Like it will cost you more to not be prepared. And it is very important, especially if you are a person that is planning to go to the front lines of a protest. Just simple things like, a gas mask and a helmet and, like a vest that will protect you from rubber bullets. And this is
just
like,
have fun with it. Wear your Captain America helmet or something, Pretend it's a costume.
Dude, there was was this Portland last summer where I saw pictures of somebody wearing like full armor? Like they looked like fucking, like a knight from Arthur's Round Table or something. I
thought you were going to say like Iron Man or something.
No, like full on like fucking like medieval armor. It was fucking brilliant.
Like Ren Fair. They stumbled.
Yeah.
Maybe they were at a Ren Fair, stumbled across a protest.
But yeah, dude, have fun with it. Like this is, and again, like I think protests, and I've talked about this before too, protests are a way to publicly unpack and deal with grief and also to celebrate. And we need to keep that intact. We need to make these places where we can come together as communities and deal with, the fucking rise of fascism, where we can, plant seeds to continue organizing outside of these public events. But these public events are still incredibly sacred in that way, in the way that they are, particularly now when people have been quarantined for so long, a way to come together and be in community with one another and deal with grief, because this is something that we need to do together, right? So I think that it's super important that we maintain that and not shy away from it just because, fascism is, back on the rise. It was always a part of the US, let's be honest. And I think that, we really need to double our efforts, triple our efforts, and at the same time remain safe. Like, yes, and do this and be safe about it. And that's my Jewish mother PSA. Thank you.
Well said. So moving on to the next topic. Many of you probably already know this one, but there is an extreme drought going through the mainly western U.S. right now, and this is becoming the norm. This is, many years in a row, we're seeing these 1 in 1,000-year droughts and stuff like that. It really is becoming the norm because this is climate change. And despite the fact that we have more coverage of it than we used to, it's still nothing compared to the amount that this should be talked about.
Yeah, so the Hoover Dam.
Heard of it.
That big fucking thing that is roughly 30 miles east of Vegas. You may have driven by it or driven over it, I guess, through it. What do you say?
I think you drive over it.
Over it. Yeah, you wouldn't drive through it, I guess.
Not unless you were some sort of alien spaceship.
Oh, that's right. UFOs are here.
We need to talk about that as well. I'm convinced that it's just useful to the... I'm going to cover it all in one sentence. It's just useful to the Pentagon and everything to say, like, oh, we don't know what's out there. It's going to get us any minute.
Space Force.
We need Space Force. Russian hackers could hack our electric grid. I mean, we need billions more for our military. Anybody could, Iran might be doing something. Like, it's just always be afraid, always think there's something out there that's going to get us, and put billions of dollars into military.
Well, and you watch these really great videos of a guy debunking like the infrared.
Yeah, I want to. I'd have to get into more details,
Okay.
but I want to maybe do a segment on detailing the kind of these claims, which are getting more and more hilarious. But anyway.
Right. But spoiler alert, they're not actually unidentified flying objects. They're identifiable if you know what the fuck you're looking at. The thing is that most of us don't, because most of us don't stare at infrared imagery of planes.
Well, and furthermore, even if they are unidentified flying objects, that just means they're unidentified flying objects. It just means it's an infrared bird from 100 miles away or whatever the fuck. Like, and you and I have discussed this before.
Yes.
Look, there's and I'm sorry, a huge tangent, but it makes me angry. There's basically 3 or 4 possibilities. 1, there is no life out there. 2, there's life out there other than us, but it's so far away that we're never going to fucking see it because space, guess what? Huge! So if 1,000 light years away, you think you're going to meet them someday soon. Or C, there is a phenomenally advanced life out there that's able to travel 100,000 light years or whatever in a relatively normal amount of time, or has access to wormholes or crazy shit, and they're so fucking advanced that we are termites to them. We are ants. There is no reason they would come around and, just hover above our fucking F-35s for 5 minutes every week. It's fucking no, okay? Those are basically your options. I'm sorry. We're either termites or they're not out there. Deal with it.
Thank you. I was Lee Camp, everyone. So
I got to do a longer segment on that.
I think you should
Get out my anger on it.
Well, because it's also a great lesson in media literacy. It's a great lesson in not listening to anything the Pentagon says and thinking it's true.
Anytime. Here's the media literacy. Anytime you have our media and our government and our Pentagon basically all at once shift on a topic, or shift their view of a country, or shift their view of a certain people that they've now decided are terrorists when they used to fund them, there's a reason for it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't just come out of the blue. It's not just, oh yeah, we suddenly saw a video that made us think aliens are real. Like, there's a reason for it. And their reason is, to continue to fund to the tune of $1 trillion with basically 0 audits, because they never actually audit themselves in a successful way. We have to keep funding our military to the tune of $1 trillion. So
more, yeah. Okay, so veering back to, taking the spaceship back to the original topic
back to
here.
Earth. Coming back down to Earth.
Okay. This news again, the Hoover Dam, which you're driving over, not through, which we've just established thanks to the aliens. The Hoover Dam reached its lowest level ever. That's just... Yeah.
Not the dam, the reservoir.
The reservoir, yeah. No,
the dam, luckily, is the same height it's been.
Sorry. Yeah, no, the dam is still in place. Unfortunately, fortunately, I don't know. Okay, so Lake Mead, which was formed because of the damming in the 1930s, is the largest reservoir in the United States and serves roughly 25 million people, including in the cities of LA, San Diego, Phoenix, Tucson, and Vegas. And I'm just going to go on a little tangent here. There's no fucking reason for there to be as many people or as much water need in places like Vegas or Los Angeles. I can't remember.
Is crazy.
It's fucking stupid. If you've ever driven to Vegas, you literally come out of the fucking blinding ass desert, and all of a sudden it is this giant collection of like
fountains,
plasticized, like just grotesque. It makes me lose all hope in humanity. I've been to Vegas once. I'll never go again because it's
looks
sad.
Like a series of helicopters dropped like Disney World buildings in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
And it's fucking bizarre. And then everywhere in it is so aggressively air conditioned to try and compete with being in the desert, and the amount of water that is needed to make Vegas a thing is fucking crazy. And you can't even get out of the air conditioned buildings. Like, I was there once for a convention I was performing at, and I left the building to go running because I was like, I can't fucking be in this air conditioning anymore. And I went running, and it took me a half mile to get across the parking lot of the casino. And then I ran another like 2 miles, and it was so ridiculously hot that I think I almost died. I was like, by the time I got back, I was like trudging through the half-mile parking lot, like crawling on my hands and knees. And then I got back in, and people inside saw me and realized I had been outside and were like, literally, someone was like, "You went outside? Why?" Like, it is the most bizarre dystopian
It's fucking terrifying.
horror show.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
But you can see people on oxygen tanks pulling a lever that they think is going to change their lives at any minute.
That's what I'm saying. You will lose all hope in humanity. All ye who enter here. So yeah, and there's also there's this quote that I love. I love pulling from a book called Cadillac Desert, The American West and Its Disappearing Water by Mark Reisner. It's a book that I read probably like, I don't know, like almost 20 years ago now. But it's a brilliant book. And one of the things he says in it is if LA had been what we now call LA had been left to its own evolutionary devices, the perfect animal that would have evolved in that area would be a camel with gills. Because it's a fucking desert. It's a desert by the ocean. And anybody who's ever like wandered through the hills of LA or Hollywood or whatever, you see that. There's like rattlesnakes and like little like cactus shrubbery and shit. That's that climate. And yet there are people with these like perfectly fucking manicured lawns and shit. And you're like, this is so unnatural. And the water to fuel that is, of course, unnaturally pumped into these areas. And guess what? That water is at fucking record low levels. So that the water in Lake Mead, the lake that was created by the Hoover Dam, it's fallen to its record low, a previous record that was set on July 1st, 2016. It's fallen 140 feet since 2000, nearly the height of the Statue of Liberty from torch to base, exposing a bathtub ring of bleached white embankments. And this is a drought that, of course, isn't just in Lake Mead. It's hit California, the Pacific Northwest, and the Great Basin, which spans Nevada, Oregon, and Utah, plus the southwestern states of Arizona, New Mexico, and even parts of the northern plains. And so because of this, you've got farmers abandoning crops. Nevada is banning the watering of about 1/3 of the lawns in Las Vegas area, which, again, you shouldn't fucking have lawns in the desert.
How do they pick which lawns? A third of lawns?
I'm assuming the rich people get to keep their lawns.
Oh my God, golf courses.
And
Jesus.
Guess what? The governor of Utah is literally asking people to pray for rain.
Oh yeah, I remember in Georgia a while back they did a rain. They had like a statewide rain prayer moment or something.
You know what?
Thoughts and prayers.
If we killed him and then wrung him out over some farm I'm just curious how much liquid is in the human body. It's
a lot. It's like 80% water.
That's what I'm saying.
So, and here's something else. I know a lot of you hear this and you're like, it's just so tough to hear how desperate things are, and there seem to be no answers. But here's the fucking scary part. The answers are here. We already have them. Okay, I did a whole segment on Redacted Tonight about how we could have clean water for the world and it not be a big deal. For one thing, it's not the only answer. This is one of the answers. There is a country that gets most of their water from recycled water, meaning most of their water comes from recycling their sewage, which I know it sounds gross, but guess what? It's completely clean and it can be done, and Namibia does it. And Namibia's done it for 50 years. And they are apparently the only country that really does that. And so that solution is there. But here's the thing. Even if you didn't want to use that as drinking water, that water could be used for all of these other purposes, such as agriculture, which is the number one use of fresh water in the world. It could be used for sprinkling lawns, although that shouldn't be done at all. It could be used for so many things that we currently use fresh water, like, giving to animals and watering all these almond plants, because, almond milk is like 99% water. And it's all these things, fracking. So there's ways to.
Although don't use anything.
Yeah,
for
don't
fracking.
don't do
Just-
fracking at
just
all,
stop.
obviously. But I'm saying, it's tough to have all of the shift at once. So it's like even if you use part of it, but then the other steps are fucking stop fracking, which uses insane amounts of water,
Fresh
and
water.
big ag, like I said, is the number one use of water in the world. And, we talked about this before. There are fucking billboards in LA saying don't wash your car. Meanwhile, one hamburger is the equivalent of showering for a month. 10 hamburgers is you're showering for a year. So it's like, they shouldn't tell us not to wash our car or don't shower or share your shower with a stranger you met on the street. They should fucking say, hey, eat a lot less meat, like a lot less meat. And instead, they won't do that. They'll just put up these little tiny solutions that are not really answers. They're basically just covering the fact that they don't want to go against big ag, go against big fracking, go against big oil.
The burden is laid at our feet, right? Even though, our choices are not the choices that have brought us to this point. You could argue, of course, humans cause climate change. So it's not like, we're totally without blame. Some of the plastic in the Pacific plastic patch is probably mine, and yours.
I thought you had left some there.
But the
I
point
saw
is
that charger you were looking for out in the Pacific.
that we are not given sustainable choices because the machine, even though it's well aware of climate change, it's well aware of plastic pollution, all of that shit, does not make it possible to affect those changes. So, for instance, I would love to just live a totally green lifestyle, but it's not physically possible for me to do that unless I just completely left society. And so the choices available to people, also, we have to look at the privilege involved. To live a green lifestyle costs a lot more, which is not accessible to the majority of Americans because guess what? The majority of fucking Americans are poor. So there's so many layers here that preclude people from accessing the choices that are actually, the best for a livable future for, us and our families. And on top of that, personal choices will only get us so far when 100 companies are responsible for 70% of fucking global emissions. The U.S. military alone has global emissions equal to 140 countries. 140 fucking countries is equal to just the U.S. military output of global emissions. That's fucking insane. And you never see a billboard that says that, like, hey, U.S. military, could you fucking, rein it in a little bit? We got to conserve water over here.
Right. And so, like, an example of how they turn it into a personal choice, even if they were to talk about the meat eating aspect of it, they would say, hey, they put up a billboard that says, hey, don't have that burger because you need to save water. But if you wanted to look at the, socioeconomic side of that, stop subsidizing McDonald's burgers to the tune of, trillions of dollars over decades. And instead, that burger, a McDonald's burger, would cost around somewhere between $100 and $200. And once you did that, guess what? People would eat a lot less meat because it would be really fucking expensive. Instead, we have the reverse, where the McDonald's burger is subsidized, so people eat them like, they're popping Tic Tacs. And meanwhile, a head of broccoli costs more than, like an organic head of broccoli costs more than that hamburger. Yeah. So it's like, you could change this so it's not about the individual choice. I mean, it ultimately would be, but once you change the system, that choice would be a lot easier to make. Right. It'd be like, oh, wow, a McDonald's burger costs $100. I'm not going to buy that because that seems, like a poor life choice. And it wouldn't just be designed to like, haha, we've fucked over poor people. No, it'd be designed to say, this is the cost to our world.
Right.
That is the cost of a McDonald's hamburger to this world. Like,
yeah. And And that, I mean, literally this goes back to, a point that we brought up earlier, like capitalism is the antithesis of human rights. It's the antithesis of a livable future. And so what's profitable, and while you were talking about burgers, I was reminded of another crop that takes up an excessive amount of water in California, which, by the way, is the breadbasket of the United States.
Celebrities.
Just by No, actually, and I don't know why I know this, but I know why I know this, because it was like a gossip in LA when I lived there. This might not be the case anymore, but I heard when I lived there that Demi Moore showers with Evian water. So
I can't verify the Demi Moore, but my brother was married to someone who was in the movies. We'll just leave it at that.
In the movies.
And we'll just leave it at that. And apparently one of her co-stars in one of these films, who was like young, like under 20, literally did bathe in bottled water.
Which I think is hilarious, because so much bottled water is literally just like
filled with plastics.
Well, but like Lewis Black's joke, it's like it's some dude in Philadelphia like filling that up in his bathtub. It's like that shit is not clean. Like, just because it comes in a plastic bottle does not mean that it's like this purified.
The one I know is straight up tap water, is Nestle Pure Life. Basically, Nestle owns like half of all these bottled waters, and they created Pure Life they created like 10 years ago. It is one of the cheaper bottles of water, and the reason is because they literally realized, we don't need to get all these from springs or whatever. We can just turn on a tap water, double filter it, claim it's double filtered, and put that on the side. And so they created Nestle Pure Life as like, no, we will sell you tap water. Here it is. Here it is.
We are not above that.
Yeah.
We use slave labor. We're not above that. Yeah. So I don't remember where I was going with that, but or even where I was.
You lived it. You were talking about Demi Moore a minute ago.
Oh, right. Okay. So another crop that uses a tremendous amount of water, besides celebrities, is alfalfa, which is grown. Get this: it is grown at huge water expense and then shipped to Asia to feed their cows.
Oh my God, yeah, that's right.
So we grow this shit to then ship. And so this is another aspect of it, right? Is that shit is like so incredibly, what's the word? Like nonsensical when it comes to, the global trade. Inefficient. Yeah. The trade networks. Like, instead of using, I don't know, some of like growing a less amount of alfalfa to feed to our cattle, we grow an obscene amount of alfalfa that doesn't even have anything to do with our cattle farming. It has to do with Asia's cattle farming. And then that meat is just sent back to us, and then it's like, here's another thing. If you go to a store in Florida and buy orange juice, you can get California oranges. If you go to California and you go to a grocery store and buy orange juice, you can get Florida oranges. Why the fuck is that a thing?
All right. So, first of all, if you want a real detailed explanation of how insane this is, and a lot about it, because it is an incredibly important topic, Peter Joseph has covered this a lot in the New Human Rights Movement, his book. But yeah, you could have, because of capitalism, we have shit shipped all over the world for insane, nonsensical reasons. You could cut, like, often a tree will be cut down in like Vancouver, which we might talk about that in a minute. A tree could be cut down in Vancouver, shipped on a boat across the fucking ocean to China to be cut down and put into the pieces that will eventually make a table. Then that is shipped back to the United States, then sometimes shipped across the United States, then gets put together and placed on a shelf at Walmart for you to buy a little table. That tree has gone around the fucking world for why? For why? And it's because capitalism is the least efficient fucking bullshit system that it's just, how can we make this for the cheapest amount, but not make it in a way that is actually sustainable, that's actually useful for Earth, that's actually useful for the natural environment. None of that comes into play in a capitalist system. And so I think Peter Joseph has done some of the best coverage on this. But if you just want to hear a one-liner joke about this, Brian Regan, the comedian, has a line where he's like, I never understand. You're on the highway, and you see two of those trucks with the big logs on the back pass each other. Are they going, wait, you had logs? Because I needed logs. Why we could have just left them there? Would have been quicker.
Oh my God, I love it. That's brilliant. Or I have a better idea. Don't fucking cut down the trees.
Or don't cut down the logs. Yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah, so I do want to touch on that really quick. But just we can kind of like blow through the next couple of topics really quick. I do want to mention, even though this happened,
All right, I'll set a timer.
I do want to mention this, even though it happened while we were not doing a show, that the Keystone XL pipeline is like dead because the developer announced that they were canceling it.
Double dead.
So this is really great news. If you haven't celebrated this,
it's huge.
Make yourself a martini tonight and fucking celebrate this, because it is worth it. After 13 years since the developer for TC Energy Corp first proposed the project, continued direct action, solidarity actions, targeted actions at, everything from financial institutions to the pipeline construction itself, has killed this fucking project. That is huge.
Led by indigenous leaders.
Absolutely.
It's been incredible. And, it was initially, and we reported this as well, it was initially celebrated that Biden had said he would not sign the licenses and things needed for Keystone XL. And
he revoked the permit to cross the U.S.-Canada border.
Revoked the permit. And people celebrated that rightfully, but this is kind of the final nail in the coffin, because despite not getting that permit, they for a while were looking for other ways to still complete Keystone XL. But here's the thing. Do not thank Biden.
Nope.
Do not thank the company that has pulled out. Thank the fucking activists for standing in the way of this, for taking it into the courts, for basically just forcing this company and the companies involved to have to continually fight in order to put this pipeline in, which cost them money every day, and eventually they realized the costs were outweighing the benefit for them. That is it. It is not that they came to their senses. It is not that they thought, oh my God, we're harming people's water. It simply is just a math equation on a napkin, the cost to them of continuing this fight.
Absolutely. And you made a good point about the loss of money. And this is a really important target that folks are now using to fight Line 3. If you go on Instagram at Stop the Money Pipeline, I posted this, I shared this post as well. So Enbridge is the company behind Line 3, and there's a long list of financial institutions that are backing Enbridge for the funding of Line 3, including TD, for instance, to the tune of $13.5 billion. TD Bank, yeah. You've got Wells Fargo, $3.86 billion. Bank of America, $3.16 billion. All of, like, JP Morgan Chase. A huge fucking list. These are targets, right? These are targets that, if they pulled out, particularly like the bigger ones, would be a huge blow to Enbridge and the Line 3 project. And so that's why financial institutions have been a target. And that's also why the direct action is, it's important on so many different levels. But for instance, one of the things that we've seen with other pipeline projects or dirty energy projects in general is time is money. So if you block some shit, even if it's just for like a day, millions of dollars are lost because they are on a very tight schedule. They want to get this shit done, and they want to get like oil or whatever, fracked gas or whatever the fuck flowing through these pipes immediately as soon as possible. So when you literally stand in the way of that, you are fucking costing them money. And that is a big deal because it means that when new projects are brought to the table, this is something that they have to now consider. Okay, well, how much is that actually going to cost us because we're going to have to deal with these pesky protesters?
And furthermore, we're on a timescale where fossil fuels are inevitably going out. I mean, no one really even denies that. The question is just how quickly. So they're on a time frame of like, how quickly can they exploit these fossil fuels before fossil fuels are no longer a thing that people are even willing to use? So in that time scale, you are saving, by stopping this pipeline for a few days, you are kind of saving humanity for a few more days while we try and get to that point where there are no fossil fuels used.
Absolutely. And speaking of Line 3, there are continued calls for people to come support if you can. At Indigenous Rising on Instagram has put a call out for the Red Lake Treaty Camp, calling for urgent help as digging continues to get closer to the river. Starting June 15th, which was yesterday, river crossings via horizontal drilling was expected to start at several I just said that, several river crossings. I'll say it again. At several river crossings, horizontal drilling was expected to start. And if you don't know what horizontal drilling is, it's literally what it sounds like. They drill under these rivers via like a horizontal drilling, which, guess what? That fucks up some shit in order to build their pipeline, which, of course, anytime you're crossing a body of water, you really run the risk of really destroying that ecosystem. And, of course, any kind of leak that would then take place in those areas would be devastating to those ecosystems.
Eleanor, how many pipelines leak?
That would be all of them.
Ding, 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 ding.
What is all of them?
Alex,
thank you. So yeah, all fucking pipelines leak. This is a horrific fucking project. Stopline3.org has a lot of great resources. They have maps of the proposed river crossings. They've got updates. They've got these calls to action. Earlier this week, 50 people were given citations for being on a pipeline easement at Firelight Camp. Last week, the treaty gathering, or a couple weeks ago now, there was the treaty gathering that drew thousands of people from across the country. And again, as I mentioned, they're continuing to ask for support for people who can actually go there and be on the front lines and work to stop this construction as it plans to cross rivers in several areas. And we've talked about it before, so I'm not going to hammer it home. But it's crossing bodies of water in hundreds of places, this proposed pipeline. So it's incredibly disgusting and important that people continue to stand in the way of it and follow this Indigenous leadership as folks continue to fight this project. So go to stopline3.org if you want to learn more about that. You can also look at Indigenous Rising on Instagram. There's that call for urgent help at the Red Lake Treaty Camp.
Yeah, so just to say that again, if you want to jot it down, the Instagram name is at Indigenous Rising.
So, and the final thing I want to talk about in terms of direct action is for our folks up in Canada, the Canadians up there. Hello.
I spoke about the Canadians this past week on Redacted Tonight. If you haven't watched it, you should definitely watch this episode. Oh my goodness, it is so good. It's about the hundreds of bodies of Indigenous children that were just discovered in a mass grave in Canada, thanks to the quote-unquote residential school system that was designed to basically commit cultural genocide. And I talk about that, and I talk about how it was also done in the United States, and it's at leecamp.com.
Yeah, a very important issue to continue to talk about. And it's not really that far away. I mean, there are people alive today who have, parents and family members that were at these boarding schools.
Some of them closed in the 70s.
Right. So this is not fucking ancient history. And to be honest, even if it fucking were, it's still grotesque and needs to be talked about. So there's a big fight happening up in Fairy Creek, which is in the Vancouver area. And they just released a call, Fairy Creek Blockade, that's their Instagram name, are calling all Canadians to join the fight as travel restrictions have been lifted in Canada. If you're in the U.S., I think it's still a little gummy to get up to Canada. But if you're in Canada, the travel restrictions inside of so-called
You
Canada.
could just try slipping a couple of toonies into the Border Patrol's hands, you know? A couple. Hey, yeah. Oh, I can't come in. Well, what do you think this loony has to say about that? You know, see how it goes.
Literally what it's called, by the way. So just some backstory on what Fairy Creek Blockade is. It's about old growth logging that was greenlit by British Columbia. That's the area where Vancouver is. Was greenlit by BC politicians, including their premier, John Horgan. And last week, Horgan announced that logging of 2,000 hectares of old growth, which is roughly 5,000 acres, in Fairy Creek and Central Walbrun areas would be deferred for 2 years, which is just not fucking good enough. First of all, 2 years means nothing to a tree, if you've ever seen a tree. It means nothing to
They don't even understand English.
It means nothing to the fight against climate change and to protect forests, but also...
And just to be clear, I think most people know this, but when you're talking old growth trees, you're talking like trees that are hundreds of years old. It's crazy. So this idea, if anyone has it in their head, like, oh, well, if they chop it down, they'll just plant a new one. No, that's not. It can't be done. It's not a thing.
No, that's once you cut it down, it's just done. So this is, of course, not only not a moratorium, but it also leaves out some 2,000 plus hectares in Fairy Creek and some 2,600 hectares in Central Walbrun of old growth that need to be protected. It also allows the construction of logging roads and allows the RCMP to, that's the Royal Canadian Police, to
mounted police,
which, by the way, they're not always mounted anymore, but you know, whatever.
But it's still in their name. Like they're on horses.
Wow. Lee started early. So it allows RCMP to police the areas and arrest at will those who are protecting trees. As of June 15th, there had been 228 arrests as the clear cutting of old growth trees continues just adjacent to where the blockades are taking place. So check out at Fairy Creek Blockade on Instagram. Again, they are calling for people to come support. These are old growth forests that have to be protected for the sake of you know, a livable future and things like that. Yeah, you know.
For the sake of still having a planet in a few years.
Yeah.
Maybe if you guys are into planets, I don't know, not everybody's into planets, but if you're into having one, then this would be a good time to care.
And the final thing that I'll say here is this parallels the work that I was just doing this past week in Northern California in Humboldt County. There's a fight. There are fights all over, actually, in Mendocino County as well, to protect predominantly second growth redwoods. And what second growth means is it has been logged before. There were once 2 million acres of old growth redwoods in the Pacific Northwest. Now there's roughly 2% of that left. So most of what's being protected in these areas of the Pacific Northwest in the United States are not old growth, unfortunately. Most of them are second generation, which means that maybe it's been like 100 years or so, or maybe even like 60 or so since these places have been logged. But the importance of second generation trees is vital because, first of all, they've been allowed to kind of regenerate. These ecosystems are finally healing themselves.
Right. After 60 years.
The habitat is coming back, and these will become the old growth forests of tomorrow. And so it's that idea of being able to look ahead, being able to look back and say, we fucked up, we're not going to do that again. Right. Looking ahead and saying, okay, we have to protect this area. And hey, I don't know, here's a fucking crazy idea. Giving the land back to the indigenous stewards who know how to fucking take care of it, do things like controlled burns, because actually fire is an important part of land stewardship, and indigenous peoples know how to do that. Ensuring how to do like selective logging so that you thin things out, so you let certain trees have more room to breathe and to grow. These kind of stewardship principles are literally like embedded in the culture of these indigenous peoples who were the stewards of this land for time immemorial. And so again, like kind of calling back to the original point I made at the beginning, the intersections of issues here. This is social justice. This is anti-colonialism. This is, pro-future. This is about building a world where we as human beings can survive. And in a space that centers liberation and justice and decenters and kills off things like colonialism and capitalism. And I'll be doing more with what I picked up while I was out there, possibly an article and a video segment as well. So stay tuned for that. But yeah.
And for those of you who, and I realize this is very privileged, but for those of you who haven't seen a redwood in person, they're amazing and glorious, and it's breathtaking. It's larger than even small ones are larger than anything you could ever imagine.
They're the tallest trees in the world, and
they're just fucking incredible. So if you have that privilege of being close enough that you are able to go see one, go see some of these redwoods in their natural habitat, and you should definitely do it, because it's fucking incredible, and it's incredibly sad that we have chopped down so many of them, but luckily there are people fighting to save what remains.
And they are welcoming folks in. So if you are interested in seeing some redwoods and also being a frontline badass at the same time, folks are welcoming people who want to do more with that. You can follow at Blockadia, at Redwood Forest Defense on Instagram, and learn more about that. And yeah, there's so many frontline fights, and I know it can get dizzying to think about, oh shit, should I go here or there or whatever. And I'd honestly say, do what you can where you can.
Well, and find the thing you're passionate about, and throw yourself into it. Mm-hmm. And that can be your fight.
Absolutely. And know that all of these fights are vital, and we really need to do a better job of not shitting on ourselves or other people for not being in the place that we have decided is the most important, which, I mean, nobody gets to fucking decide that. All of these fights are incredibly important, and all of these fights...
No, all that matters is getting vegan food into prisons, into the prison system. All right, I want prisoners to be able to eat vegan, and that is the only fight that matters.
To eat vegans or to eat vegan food?
I mean, it depends on the vegan, but generally eat vegan food.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I would eat a vegan. They're grass-fed, right?
Yeah, some of them aren't free range.
That's true. A lot of preservatives in some of the vegan foods too. Maybe I'll rethink that. Anyway, so thank you all so much for hanging out with us. We went a little bit long today because we missed you. And we wanted to hang out with you.
And if you feel that you've gotten $1 from this episode, I mean, how could you not feel that way? Go to liberapay.com/LeeCamp. This show is only funded by you guys. No one else, no sponsors, no corporations. No, I'm not telling you to buy a mattress. I mean, I think everyone should have a mattress, but I'm not telling you about a specific mattress.
Or a hammock.
Or a hammock. I haven't told you to buy shit, just because we're sponsored by you and not by them. Eleanor's album, new EP, is called No Solo. It's at artkillingapathy.com. Her movies at hardroadophobe.com. My book is at leecampbook.com. And if you want to see the redacted tonight that I mentioned, you can go to leecamp.com and watch it there. Until next time, keep fighting.
I almost said keep fighting, and then I got stuck, and then I didn't say anything at all.
It's a good thing we're concluding this show, because if you've forgotten your catchphrase, we're at a real tough moment.
Act out, everyone. We'll see you.
Right.
See you next week.